Hello friends, a very warm welcome to Ansarkari. And in the series of taking all important themes for the general studies and also from the perspective of history optional, we have been taking very critical and very comprehensive outlook which will solve all your question as far as world history topics are concerned. I would again reiterate the goal is to keep your own notes ready side by side. Pick up your doubts and questions. You can always write back to us. And I'm going to also check your answers personally once you are done with reading doubt sessions and also bringing the best of your thoughts. Like the way we have understood Italian unification, today we are taking a very important topic and theme of state building in Germany or the steps towards German unification. Very important and crucial to understand making of the modern world. So let's see first nationalism, the state building in Germany, like the way we have seen in context of Italy, in context of England, in context of France, and also in the US. So before 1806, we have to see that German-speaking Central Europe was made up of 300 political entities. They were part of the Holy Roman Empire, which was led by Habsburg dynasty, and it was criticized for neither being holy nor Roman nor a true empire. It was basically a remnant and an example of feudal, monarchical, backward-looking structure. So Germany was nominally united under imperial crown for almost 1,000 years, but it was comprising 300 individual entities, principalities or city-states. They were operating all independently, different in size and governance. Small territories, families ruling these areas, and large territories like kingdoms of Bavaria and Prussia. The governors were also varied, including free imperial cities and ecclesiastical territories, that means those were under control and under domain of church and religious bodies, and dynastic states. It was in these circumstances when Napoleon is defeating Prussia and forcing it to sign the Treaty of Prussia in 1805, under which Holy Roman Empire was dissolved and replaced by Confederation of Rhine, first important step. And this confederation was supposed to be loyal to France and the Holy Roman Emperor. Thus, for the first time, Napoleon was the gentleman or the great monarch in the eyes of Germany, which was a reorganizing German state system. He abolished 200 sovereign German states, reorganized them into 39. So don't you think consolidation? Don't you think it is a paving way forward for it, which led to the cause for German unity and nationality? But on Russia's invasion in 1812, that is 1812, and there was defeat of Napoleon. This is going to disillusion many Germans, princes and peasants. Heavy losses for the French army, which was also including lots of Germans, and also continental system, which we have already discussed that how French believed that continental system is going to give them glory, but actually British were much more resilient. So it is going to ruin the Central European economy. And under Prussian liberal intellectual environment, leaders like Wilhelm von Humboldt, they reformed the system of education. Gerhard Jean David von Scharnhorst made structural changes in the army, like the modern general staff system. So one can say that Germany created into a modern state, and the role goes to Napoleon. That is why we say that how German Confederation is coming into picture is to be seen in a very smart way. They believed established institutions of state and society like monarchy, church, property and the family, it should be preserved. So please mind these words very carefully. These are the basic characters. Otherwise the rule would be threatened. For that they made sure that new aspirations, ideas, they will be all suppressed. And different nationalities, they are actually a, a kind of a player to the consolidation of Germany. And same is the case with Italians that we have seen. So the Vienna Congress established a loose German confederation between 1815 to 1866. The impact is there. We have already spoken about Metternich system. So the federal diet, that is Bundestag, an assembly of appointed leaders, you must remember this word, it became a kind of a nominal body and it was subsumed under Austria. This was called Austrian-Prussian dualism, like the way we speak in India that there was a dual rule in Bengal. Similarly is the case over here. It was not representative of the common people. It was the conservative ruling class of Prussia. It was consolidating and it was concentrating power in its own hands. And the Bundestag has no power to enforce its decision. Only this thing you have to remember. Similarly, the spirit of separatism among Persian state was very strong. They had a strong feeling of regionalism, which was going to slow down the process of unification. Religious differences between North and South Germany, because North was Protestant and South was mostly Catholic. So these ideological differences were also the reason why German unification will be going on slow, because the common approach will not be easily found. So liberals versus radicals, because liberals emphasized on the voting rights, on the property qualifications, whereas radicals emphasized on universal franchise. So the idea of Greater Germany, including Austria part of it, or Little Germany, including Austrian German, excluding non-Germans, it will be remaining a bone of contention among the liberals, and we can see later on Hitler is going to speak on these lines somehow. So the development of spirit of liberalism was a significant feature in the process of unification, because opposing to the scientific nature of enlightenment, the counter trend of romanticism, looking through the idea of love, emotions, and love for nature, all these things, and idealism, all these things will be reflected through romanticism. So there was also an intellectual awakening, and the professors of universities began to propagate liberal ideas among the youth as opposed to Metternich repression. So that is why there will be Carlsbad decree in 1819. Please have a look at this map, which is going to help you unification of Germany by Prussia, how it is going to take place. Just remember the borders, just remember the big empire on the right side, I mean to say the Russian Empire on your east, and you can see Switzerland, France, Netherlands, and so forth. So the Carlsberg Treaty is going to create a set of reactionary restrictions. That means in 1819, at the backdrop of assassination of conservative dramatist Kutuzov by Karl Sand, a member of the radical student organization that was known as Burschenschaft. So Burschenschaften, this body, is actually a propagator of new ideas. Metternich wanted that Bundestag must suppress liberal and nationalistic tendencies within their states. There would be censorship of all periodical publications, like the way we have seen the British rule in India, disbandment of the recently formed nationalist student clubs, central investigating commissions having power to root out conspiracy against monarchies. All these decrees were loosely enforced, and it generated a sense of German nationalism when the nationalistic tendencies will rise. So revolution will be starting in France in July 1830, and it will be inspiring the patriots of Germany, but it will be crushed by Metternich with the help of Carlsbad decree. So this is how the process is going on. Similarly, the Empire of Austria will be remaining untouched by the influence of revolution. At the same time, influence and power of Metternich was at the peak, and we know that it will be going down after some decades. So restricted, and I should say repressive, and also I would say the colonialistic word we cannot use with respect to Germany by Austria, but it is also a kind of colonial feature. These ideas will be suppressing revolutions in different parts of Germany. So Karlberg, very important. Karl's bad decrees, they are the one which are very important tool in the hands of conservative monarchs like Metternich, restricting public speeches, restricting press, universities, colleges, but then out of which will be coming out economic front like formation of Zollverein, custom union. So Zollverein custom union, very important, 1834. So you can say by signing this, Persian custom union was finally organized. Economic unification among Persian and also uh, other Germany princes and other Germany territories, and Austria will be not part of this custom union because of its protectionist policy. So platform will be giving Persia to mold itself into a power which will be creating union as per requirement. So protectionist barriers, once they were removed, it will be easier and affordable to move goods across territorial borders. So economic power will be rising in terms of industrial centers located in Rhineland, Saar and the Ruhr valleys. Please do look into locations. Similarly, many smaller states entered the custom union for purely fiscal reasons, but there will be ideas of nationalism and patriotism coming up because they were very much suspicious of Prussia and also generally believing that pro-Austrian ideas were there. So revenue will be increased. They will be consolidating their power, thereby their independence. But with the creation of this custom union, Prussian ministers and the government officials, they started to view Germany as a whole, and there will be significant improvement in the socio-economic status due to free trade among the states. Political awareness will be another tool which will be strengthening the liberal movement in Germany, thereby breaking the traditional barrier, thus paving the way for unification. Similarly, the revolution in 1848-49 is another very important marker because now the February revolution of 1848 that was breaking out in many European countries like Denmark, France, Italy, Germany, it ended the constitutional monarchy of Louis Philippe and the French Second Republic. It established, Louis Napoleon, the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, who was elected as president. In 1852, he staged a coup, established himself as a dictatorial emperor of the Second French Empire. Metternich exclaimed, "When the French catches cold, all Europe sneezes." That means whatever changes are witnessed in France at this time due to revolution, whole Europe will be impacted. In Vienna, Austria, student organized demonstrations were there. They will be acting into a kind of a big firestorm, and people will be armed resistance to, and they will be fighting with the troops, and the uprising of workers will be there, and then liberal bourgeois, they will also be supporting it. The state leadership of Habsburg regime decided to give in. This resulted in the resignation of same Metternich as the chief minister to the Emperor Ferdinand I of Austria, who was at the peak as we have seen from 1815 onwards. Similarly, in Germany, fundamental demand of liberal bourgeois were the freedom of the press, trial by jury, creation of German parliament, and these demands when asked by liberal bourgeois, new government was established in Saxony, Bavaria dominated by liberal representatives. So Frederick Wilhelm IV of Prussia gave in to the popular fury, promised a constitution, a parliament and support for German unification. At this backdrop we can say Frankfurt parliament took place in 1848. So Frankfurt Parliament though came into picture, but it failed to create a unified Germany because it called for elections of a national assembly based on rural suffrage, and it was going to draw up a constitution of united Germany to replace the German Bundestag and create a new system under constitutional monarchy, federal constitution, and constitutional monarchy for German states, excluding Austria. Universal suffrage, parliamentary government, unified monetary and custom systems, but federal character for states. Do remember this. So as the parliament represented narrow base, it comprised intellectuals, lawyers, journalists, teachers, and petty bourgeois, but not the nobility, peasant, and the working class. That is the whole problem. And this narrow base represented a competitive ideologies and groups at work because everybody was trying to outsmart other group. That is why it is going to create a churning but not a consolidation. So factionalism occurred among the members for federal versus unitary, royalist versus republic, Protestant versus Catholic, aristocracy versus new bourgeois, division of powers, pro-Austria versus pro-Prussian elements. Further, the friction intensified over a territorial extent of Germany. We must have the greater Germany or little Germany. Same idea carried on by Hitler. The German parliament was defeated by narrow nationalism at Frankfurt. This is what one can understand and you can write in examination. Frederick dissolved parliament in 1849 without the support of either Prussia or Austria. The Frankfurt National Assembly could not survive. The extreme liberals now moved to armed revolts, but these were put down by Prussian groups. Therefore, the conservative aristocracy at last won over the liberal bourgeois. Now, this experiment was a failure, and many German states refused to be part of this and they didn't accept it. The constitution, liberal lacks political experience, there was no organization, no effective leadership, they lacked military backing unlike the aristocrat leader Bismarck. The movement started by Bismarck was going to change. Therefore, bourgeois in nature, it lacked the support of peasant and laborers, but now Bismarck was coming up in the picture. So Frederick William IV supported the establishment of Erfurt Union. Federation of German States, excluding Austria by the free agreement of German princes with himself as its president. But Austria was putting pressure. So Persian king abandoned this idea of the Erfurt Union by Convention of Olmützin in 1850. So the Persian agreed to the restoration of German Confederation of 1815 under the Austrian leadership, as we had seen in the Congress of Vienna. This seized all plans of German unity and restored Austria's influence once more. This became to known as Convention of Olmütz, but among Prussian it was known as Humiliation of Olmütz. Like you can see, a pattern is there. So this is not an ongoing process like the way we see in India. It is nobody is actually brutally suppressing cultural, social, political, economic values of Germany like the way India had suffered. But then you can see there are different stages. So the question of German unification was known to Germans, but they were not able to do it. Diplomatic victory was required. Metternich idea of balance of powers among the four great powers, that is Great Britain, France, Russia, and Austria. It must remain. It was to be overturned. If German becomes a great power, then this power balance apple cart will be upturned down. That is why no German unification was desired. So further question also rose that who would best lead and defend Germany. So present answer was Lesser Germany under the leadership of Prussian Hohenzollerns royal family, which would exclude Austria, or the Greater Germany, where German states would be led under the leadership of Austrian Habsburgs. So these two families, they are trying to create conditions for their own betterment. Whether you think about Hohenzollerns royal family or you speak about Austrian Habsburgs. So conditions were arising because of the global conditions also, which presented idea to Prussian leader Bismarck in 1862, and the present conditions were favorable to Prussia. Favorable condition when we see, so we have already discussed about Crimean War. It was going to weak Russian power, and antagonism toward Austria was there. Similarly, Prussia was natural leader of Germany because of the economic head of Zollverein, as we have already discussed. Military leaders like von Moltke, chief of Prussian general staff, von Runas, Prussian minister of war, both Moltke and Rune became reorganizing Prussian army, and they streamlined operational command. In all modern and scientific developments which we see militarily, they will also be starting. King Wilhelm I appointed Bismarck as the minister president of Prussia in 1862. He wanted to subdue liberal influence in the Diet on matters of military reforms. Now Bismarck, he continued to levy and collect taxes without parliament grant and fully carried out military reforms. Like already, he was very clear. So direct taxation, increase in military conscription, introduction like needle gun, introduction like new battle tactics. He was very clear that what Germany must do. That is why in 1863, Wilhelm will be forced to dissolve the Diet and make the constitution responsible solely to the king. And Bismarck was going to consolidate his powers, but he was not a really popular politician. People really, not all the people, all the groups are not really going to appreciate because he was a very tough guy. His candidates performed poorly in the elections of October 1863, in which Liberal coalition won over two-thirds of the seats. That is how Bismarck will be using the policy of blood and iron to win the support of masses, and he will be also paving the way for German unification. That is why we can say that Otto von Bismarck, 1862 to 1890, Minister of Foreign Affairs, then later on Minister of President of Prussia, German unification by the Prime Minister Otto von Bismarck is the key thing. So he joined civil service he joined civil service initially, and in 1847 he became the member of United Prussian Diet under Frederick William IV. Anti-revolutionary, denounced democracy, supported Prussian monarchy. That is what diplomacy is all about. Against Prussian merging into German confederates, and he was pro-Austrian on surface, like the way he was knowing very well that Prussia is only the key through which German doors will be opened. So pro-royalist attitude. He was nominated to be diplomat as Prussian representative at the Federal Diet at Frankfurt in 1851. As a Prussian representative, he became aware of Austrian intentions. Therefore, he will be now developing and creating strong anti-Austrian sentiment. He started thinking about Germany as a whole, not just Prussian state. Fundamental problem of Germany was interference of Austria. He was aware of this and the attitude of smaller German states. Later on, he was transferred to St. Petersburg, Tsar Russia, where he secured goodwill of Tsar. He became ambassador to France, and he got into complexities of the character of Napoleon. So he is the guy who is moving around from one place to another, but as an institution. Therefore, he is going to use coal and iron policy, economic strength of unifying Germany. John Maynard Keynes, 20th century economist, argued the German Empire was not founded on blood and iron, but on coal and iron. Coal and iron, economic powerhouse, economic strategies. Under the Prussian custom union, Zollverein policies like standardization of weights and measures, free trade, adopting custom union currency made way for closer economic cooperation between German states. So Zollverein used protectionist policy to protect German business from foreign influence, thereby adopting free trade inside the union. This created a large market for home-produced goods at cheaper prices. It slowly broke down ethnic and religious barriers, which are also there in developing countries like India. When in general studies questions comes up, and even in the history optional, even in political science paper too. So these barriers once broken, they are now going to give space to the greater Germany identity, an identity of pan-German understanding. He became a natural leader of United German Confederates. He was successful in economic integration of German states and simultaneously keeping Austrian influence at length. This was all happening by 1851. Only Austria was remaining out. So the economic integration was made faster by expansion of communication systems like railways. It led to rise of conscience among Germans through the spread of German press. And middle class emerged who were mobile and more loyal to the Persian state. Think about India, what was happening after Dalhousie. That is why UPC is asking you questions, that who is the maker of modern India in some ways. So the coal and iron, this economic strength is going to provide rapid industrialization. We have already discussed about industrialization of how the UK was there. Then later on we discussed about France, we discussed about Japan, we discussed about even US and even about Germany. So you can connect from there. So it is going to create powerful Prussia, and later blood and iron policy of Bismarck will be paving the way for unification of Germany by diplomatic and military strength. That is why Prussian army became very important tool, very powerful. And Bismarck had to struggle against majority in parliament, as liberals would not support his ambitious schemes. After Bismarck became minister president, he expressed the essence of real politics in his famous blood and iron speech. That is how this speech became so important. At the budget committee of the Prussian Chamber of Deputies in 30th September 1862, he said Prussia must concentrate and maintain its power for the favorable movement, which has already slipped by several times. Prussia's boundaries, according to Vienna treaties, are not favorable. They are not favorable to a healthy state life. The great questions of the time will not be resolved by speeches and majority decisions. They can only be done by iron and blood. And this was the mistake, he said, was done already in 1848 and 1849. So by 1862, with this speech, the idea of peaceful pan-Germanism shifted from the liberal and democratic character to a more conservative real politics. So one keyword over here, which you're going to pick up and write in your answers, is conservative real politics. Similarly, his realpolitik was focused on practical diplomacy based on Persian state realism and pragmatism on war rather than ideology and ethical reasons. His blood and speech emphasized the intention and capability of German states. He believed in the capability. He believed, like the way India, when it was ruled by the British, we believed in our capabilities that we can win over British under all circumstances. But here, Germany is not fighting a colonial power like the way India was fighting. That is why they are actually trying to become economically more powerful, because they can do so. India couldn't. So the capability to produce iron, war materials, intention to use them if necessary, doesn't mean lust for war. That is what Bismarck is saying. So unification of Germany, when failed in 1848 and 1851, it showed that economic cooperation alone was not going to unify Germany, and German states were economically unified under Prussia for political matters. They are still actually turning at the feet of Austria. This was due to binding treaties on German states. Therefore, in order to unite Germany into one state, or you can say great state under Prussia, there was a need for a single power, and the outside enemy, which is actually one hurdle for all Germany, was Austria. Even if we need to fight war against Austria. Remember the Italian unification, it was quite different from the way German unification took place. So real politics is the key thing here. Isolating the enemy in international sphere. So Persian-Franco relationship is very important because Germany concluded a commercial treaty with France, and the Persian-Tsar relationship. Germany was actually, when Crimean War was happening, Austria hostile neutrality has irritated Russia. Tsar was furious that earlier Russians had saved the Austrian Empire from dissolution during the Hungarian revolt of 1848-1849, but now Austria were not coming to their help. This resulted in the breakdown of Metternich alliance of Russia, Austria, and Prussia. Now Tsar looked towards Prussia for friendship. It could see the rising Prussia. So, with the coming of Bismarck, who is going to carefully use this antagonistic feeling of the Tsar towards Austria for their benefit. And in 1860, the revolt of Russia and Poland is also one of the indicators when Germany is going to offer help to Tsar in suppressing Polish revolt. This secured the goodwill of the Tsar. The result was Austria was completely isolated during the Austro-Prussian War as Russia was neutral. Thus, Austria was defeated and German Empire was unified under Prussia. So, Persian-Austrian relationship, when we see, it is changing. Bismarck is persuading Austrian King William not to attend the Congress of Princes in 1863, thereby ruining the hope of Austria in consolidating her leadership of Germany. So, in order to enforce his realpolitik, Bismarck waged three wars with Denmark, Austria, and France, and between 1864 to 1870, he was creating this whole strategy by his complete willpower and confidence, and German unification was achieved. That is why the first war, which was with Denmark, which is very, very important to understand, was in the lines of Schleswig-Holstein question. The Schleswig-Holstein question, you can say the name after territories, because the controversy between Denmark, Prussia, and Austria was over the status of these territories. The population of northern Schleswig was Danish, and the southern was German and mixed in between. And the population of Holstein was almost entirely German. Again, a kind of a big scenario if you visualize. So, with the Napoleonic Wars, there were German nationals feeling that Schleswig-Holstein should form a single state within the German Confederation. For that, German nationalists wanted Schleswig and Holstein under German confederates, whereas Danish nationalists, they will never argue, they will never agree, I should say, and they argued that Schleswig was Dane territory for centuries, with river Elder is as a neutral boundary. So in 1858, when the uprising took place in Germany, it dominated Holstein and was helped by the military intervention of Prussia, whose army drove Denmark's troops from Schleswig-Holstein. This was similar to Ukraine-Russian War of 2022 in Luhansk, Donetsk region. That's what we have seen. So the war ended with the intervention of great power, making Prussia sign the London Protocol in 1852. So under the terms of peace agreement, German Confederation returned Schleswig-Holstein to Denmark, whereas Danish government was to adhere to the existing provision of constitutional status of Schleswig and Holstein. But in 1863, King Christian IX of Denmark declared Duchy of Schleswig as a part of Denmark. Now again, this will be an irritant. The German Confederation saw this act as a violation of London Protocol of 1852. Remember, London is again a big power. That is why they are all coming over there. Bismarck saw this an opportunity to rally German nationalist voice for their own people in Schleswig and Holstein. He wanted to put Prussian military might to use, but acting alone without the federal Diet's approval would be difficult. So he again used realpolitik to gain Austria support over here against Denmark, because at the end of the day, he is convincing Austria, we are going nowhere. You are our boss. Thus, German-Danish War of 1862 concluded with the defeat of Danish and the signing of peace treaty at Vienna 1864, where Austrian King Christian IX ceded Schleswig-Holstein to Austria and Prussia. So that means half job was done. After successful military intervention, Bismarck put his diplomacy to test. The Convention of Gastein followed in 1865, and after the seizure of Schleswig and Holstein from Denmark, the pact was signed between Danes, Austria, and Prussia. The pact said that Prussia administered Schleswig and Austria administered Holstein. But both the territories were now part of Zweibrücken. This is the key thing. This Gastein Convention was a great diplomatic triumph for Bismarck. I hope do you agree with this point, because this is how he was doing it in a smart way, like the way Gandhiji was taking up different movements in India and trying to make sure that all ideologies and even all people of India must come together and go for a national movement, or I should say national war in theoretical terms against the British. So this is going to sideline federal Diet, used Austria as an ally, weakened Danes, and included both the duchies into Zollverein. That is what you must be writing in your answer. Therefore, the unification of Italy provided Prussia an ally against Austria in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866. We have already discussed about this, that Italian unification was also in different phases. And now you can see how it was playing an important role in context of German unification also. So Austrian Prussia, they are going to fight together against the Danes, and they are winning over duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. But the Gastein Convention at Austria it was highly advantageous to Austria. So this, I must say, not advantageous, disadvantageous to Austria. So therefore, the control, or you can say maintaining them, or even one can say administrating them, was really difficult. Therefore, Zollverein is going to make Prussia more powerful. As Bismarck himself said that Gastein Convention merely papered over the cracks. War with Austria was necessary for a long-lasting unification of Germany. So you can understand, you have to bring the concept even in your mains answer writing. So the crisis started in 1866 when Prussia protested the decision of Austrian governor of Holstein to permit the estates of duchies to call up a united assembly, declaring the Austrian decision a breach of the principle of joint sovereignty. Bismarck will be using this as an excuse to start a war with Austria by accusing them of violating the Gastein Convention, though himself he was knowing what he was actually doing was beneficial for German unification. So Bismarck is going to send troops to occupy Holstein, expelling Austrians, and therefore the uh, secession from the Confederation by Prussia will be such an important step, along with that declaring war upon Austria in on the lines of self-defense. This is going to create a different diplomatic scenario. This war is called 7 Weeks War, but more than a war, it is a strategic initiative. Bismarck already working on his own diplomatic channels, making an alliance with United Italy now over here, which was committing into the war. So Tsar Russia chose strategic silence in support towards Prussia. So one can make out today's strategic ramifications of different political powers in the world. They also behave in such a way. So France, which had promised to aid Austrians, but it came late and it was insufficient. So everybody is looking for their own strategic benefits. This came to be very costly for the Austrian army. They will be facing a very powerful and superior Prussian army, and the alliance with Italy will be making Austrian army busy in the Italian province in Venetia and Adriatic Sea. Now these all circumstances will be really helping Prussian to gain the victory. Similarly, in 1866, it was the Battle of Sadowa, very important, where Austria will be badly defeated. So to prevent Franco-Russia from entering into battle, Bismarck will be recommending King William I of Prussia to make peace with Austrians urgently, in a way where the Austrians will believe that actually Prussians are really sorry. So the Treaty of Prague was signed in 1866, which was done under the observant eyes of France, and the peace resulted in again a dissolution of German Confederation, Schleswig and Holstein assigning to Prussia, and the Peace of Vienna. In 1866, Austria ceded Venetia territory to Italy. So, on the other hand, Bismarck is trying to make sure that Austrians are becoming weak with time. So the North German Confederation, which was formed under the presidency of Prussian king in 1867, it is going to play an important role. It will be consulting, it will be having its own administrative decisions, including national flag, national parliament, Reichstag with universal suffrage for more than 25 years of age. It had Bundesrat, the Federal Council of the representative of the allied governments, and the government was having power, and that is why it was given all veto power to take any decisions. You have to remember these key words so that you can write in the mains examination. So the formation of the North German Confederation destabilized the European balance of power, which was there since Congress of Vienna of 1815. Now you can see the Metternich system, which we have discussed earlier on. So the victory at Sadowa, Austria was reduced to middle power with the annexation of important territories like Austrian duchies. Therefore, now Austria will be forced to shift its attention to Balkans. She will be also abandoning the policy of centralization by compromise with Hungarians, which was resulting into the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which will be lasting till the end of World War. When Hungarians will be getting equal status with that of Austrians in the matter of separate constitution, legislature, and administration, but it will be united in terms of foreign and military affairs. So Austria is here a big colonial, or you can say imperialistic, or you can say self-centered power, which is breaking down a bit by bit. So the first obstacle was removing the Austrian influence. Second obstacle to German unity was between the relationship between Prussia and the smaller German states. Therefore, the Prussian state annexed the southern German states, Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, and Hesse, which made it too powerful for any country in Europe to challenge solely, which is reflected in the First and Second World War. Prussia's friendship with Italy in southern Europe threatened the French army continent and their navy in the Mediterranean. Therefore, Battle of Sadowa, it is believed that it was going to seal the fate of France also. France, fearing Hohenzollern encirclement, it will be declaring war on Prussia in 1870, resulting in the Franco-Prussian War at the Battle of Sedan, 1870, within 4 years. So at the Battle of Sadowa, the French public resented Prussian victory and demanded the revenge for Sadowa. Bismarck had threatened France that it might annex parts of Belgium and Luxembourg to draw off France. These annexations never happened, but it went on to worsening the relations with Bismarck. Therefore, Bismarck, being a real politic and a great diplomat and a statesman in his own right, he was knowing that business is not yet finished. That is why war against France was very important and necessary to arouse German nationalism in those states which are not actually ready to join Prussia in making whole Germany one united power. Therefore, Franco-Prussian War must take place before a united Germany is formed. So further, Germany was also having internal problems such as acquiring millions of new citizens as a result of Austria-Prussian War of 1866. Some, German states were opposed to centralization of Prussian state. Bismarck only wanted to consolidate these gains. He wished for personalization of Germany. So you can understand, if Germany is there, the soul is Prussia. The third obstacle was the attitude of France, that the France could not allow Prussia to destroy balance of power in Central Europe by eradicating or creating a unified Germany. Even UK is also witnessing everything, but UK is very, very busy and it believed that it is not going to be hampered. So weakened position of French ruler Napoleon III. He was confronted with increased demands for democratic reforms and there were radical issues in front of him. There was chances of revolution in France and he believed that to unite the French nation behind Bonaparte's dynasty, a quick victory against Prussia was needed so that people would be believing in his power. Then he could suppress revolutionary sentiment under French nationalism and French will be ruling the European politics. Thus he started to demand territorial compensations from Prussia and the agreement with Bismarck, what was done before the Battle of Sadowa must be carried on by Prussia. His demands were not properly defined. Prussia was not, you can say not convinced. He, or you can say Napoleon now turned to the demands of Belgium and Luxembourg as territorial compensations. Here Napoleon means Napoleon III of France. He also demanded from Prussia a return to the French borders of 1814 to maintain peace in the region. You can check out in the global map that how the border of British, France, and even Germany, they are actually spread out, including Italy. The French emperor also believed the candidacy of Leopold of Hohenzollern and Sigmaringen, a German royal house. It was looking forward to the throne of Spain. France feared an encirclement resulting from an alliance between Prussia and Spain. But it was confident that it is going to win. Therefore, Napoleon III is going to declare war on Prussia in July 19, 1870. His military officials were convinced that the modern reorganization of the army, technical innovations like breech-loading gun and rifles and newly invented military use and early machine gun is going to give them victory. But the victory of Prussia in the Battle of Sedan was decisive. And this decisive victory is paving the way for German unification. King William of Prussia was crowned Emperor of Germany, and by the Peace of Frankfurt 1871, France gave away Alsace-Lorraine. So the Franco-German War made Germany mistress of Europe and Bismarck as master of Europe. So we agree that German unification was more achieved by coal and iron than by blood and iron. You can elaborate now, bringing back all the events in very nutshell. Napoleon kindled the sentiment, but German unity was achieved by Bismarck. It was France that was defeated at Sadowa. We have already discussed it. The unification of Germany was one thing, and Bismarck was determined to prevent. Very true. He was trying to do in his own ways. Isolation of France constituted the keystone of Bismarck's foreign policy. A war with France lay in logic of history. At the end of Battle of Sedan, Europe lost a mistress and gained a master. And to Bismarck, the conclusion of Treaty of 1882. Here you must know the name. We have already discussed culmination of his system. Political unity of Germany was accomplished solely by Bismarck. Bismarck created a new Germany with the policy of blood and iron. And Bismarck united Germany not by majority of votes and speeches but by policy of blood and iron. Again, you have to assess contribution of Bismarck. Critically examine role of Zollverein. We have discussed in details. Napoleon was creator of modern Germany. It is one of the ironies we have also discussed. You have to comment over here. Language of narrow nationalism held at Frankfurt destroyed the German Revolution as Italy and Germany. The comparison between Clever and Bismarck's achievements reveal striking points of resemblance and no less striking points of dissimilarity. We have also discussed that also. Unification of Italy and Germany constituted a contrast in respect of the ways they were affected and the impact left on the international politics. Comparison between the unification of both these countries reveals striking points of resemblance and no striking. Again, this question has been asked 2 times. That is why I say by doing Italy and by German unification, we have covered a very huge part. And now you can actually understand that how in international relations, Europe and later on First World War and even Second World War and even coming of NATO and even today's times, the relation of India with Europe, they all are reflected somewhere. The seeds were laid down in these times when India was a colony and it was fighting for its own freedom, I would say, and it was ready to fight against the British, and British were political masters looking forward to doing whatever possible they could do to drain wealth from India. So thank you very much for this session. Do make your own notes, do make your own points, do all these questions, and we will be discussing next lesson very soon.